far as projects go?
as far as projects?
Well, we've probably invested somewhere in the neighborhood of 200,000, I would guess, in improvements as well as fixing things up. I think part of it, you touched on the flood and what it did to us, and yes, we may recover some of that from FEMA, we hope. We're still not certain because they haven't agreed that all the electrical problems are their problems, but obviously the system took a big hit, and we still aren't sure, transformers being one, and our experience today might show us a way in that regard. And what that involves is the transformer at the IGA food market went out today. And that, of course, is a large one. And it could signify that we've struggled with, what do we do with those things? Because you can't see in them, you can spend a lot of money testing them. And we've been hesitant to want to spend what we have bids of $17,000 to $25,000 to run around and have someone look at them. So we probably still don't know the full extent, but we do know that we've been able to, with improvements, minimize the line loss. If you remember, we were up close to, after the flood, I think we were 18–20%, and we've lowered that back down to the 5%, which is customary for a system like this. So I think, as I look at the numbers, I appreciate your concern for why the municipals aren't signaled out in there. The consultant does work for all of the municipals in the area, and I believe the commission had asked him for names and numbers, so to speak, and the only names and numbers that the consultant feels comfortable are the ones that he can pull off of internet sites. So that's why you see specifics for the ones listed. The rest of them he lumps under municipal. And in the detailed report, I believe he listed 6 municipals that are comparable and the ones that we would probably compete against in terms of ourselves. So I think the commission looked at those and felt that they were rational. You raised another good point about, what was the last part you brought out?
In reference to, I didn't read the whole report, so I didn't see any comparison on other municipals. Yep.
They were just listed as municipal 1, 2, and 3 without a name. So they gave us information but not specific town, although there's a town behind that number. And I think he did, all I know, he did sort of protect his confidentiality agreements he has with each. The commission is currently, I think, has worked very hard to, for example, is creating a project to try to put underground lineage in the downtown area, which hopefully, if another disaster does strike, will limit the amount of disruption we have in the downtown area. At the same time, they've authorized a grant to be written that hopefully would pay for most of that. If we're able to do that, that will cut the amount needed, I think, for the utility substantially. The other part that is very difficult to, I think, for people to get into and to explain, and I'll take a whack at it, maybe Vern, you can help me out, and it's this idea of the net profit increase. What's your net income margin? And the consultant would argue that if this were a private-owned utility, they would pay taxes to the community, substantial taxes. And so if you were doing that, you try to figure something called a payment in lieu of, because this utility is operating, but it's not supporting the business structure of the community with its taxes. And so what he's trying to get the utility here to understand is, and I'll just read down the net income percentages that the municipal governments in this area, the 6 of them that he works for besides Rushford, he has one at 3.8, one at 5.9, one at 7.2, 7.5, 7.9, and 12.5. Those are all direct returns that those municipal utilities make back to the community for other projects beyond electrical. So it'd be like paying the council the tax dollars and saying you use them for whatever projects you want to work on. In Rushford's case, this rate increase for the first time would put us at a 4.6% net income return margin. And I think the decision of the board, if I heard them right, was they were trying to bring themselves to a position of being responsible as a utility and responsible for their improvements, but also responsible to the community and to the council to provide something for the council to work with. Vern, am I missing things, or is that pretty much the discussion that took place?
That's pretty close. The last two rate increases that we took, or that we sent to the public, to our customers, actually weren't large enough to provide a positive return for the utility. So, you know, with the lower rates and the decreased sales, that's what's causing our negative number at year end. And so, you know, along with the expenses, of course, of maintaining the system after the flood, a lot of things showed up, and we're trying to get ahead of that so that the same things that happened over the weekend don't happen within our distribution system, our secondary distribution. Yes, Jim?
Yeah, I understand your problems with the system. You know, I'm explaining it from our perspective. And, you know, you say in lieu of taxes, you have an enterprise fund that contributes. Well, let's look at it that way. This 10% or 9.8%, which will affect the store, we'll be paying over $5,000 more per year on that alone, in addition to the real estate, you know, taxes that we pay, which are substantial. And I think in reference to your point, Vern, about reduced numbers because of after the flood, people leaving or not returning to Rushford. If we continue, in reference to the letter that was read here tonight and other comments, if we continue on these fee increases and these increases in taxes, you're going to have fewer numbers. That's my point. It won't solve that problem.
Mr. Mayor, and one other point that Mr. Hines touched on was, as the commission looked at the costs, I think, of the line items in the budget, and they did spend considerable time last meeting painstakingly going through each line item to see if there were areas that they could cut. So from the commission's point of view, I think they have done, as they say, their due diligence to make sure that there isn't fat that they've missed or something they could cut. And so they've tried to do the best, and at the end of that discussion, the decision was still not changed in terms of what they had initially thought at the prior meeting, that this increase was needed. And I don't know what more we can ask of them, but I believe they did spend the time and the energy doing that.